said yes. And then I was like, oh my God, what am I going to talk about? There's so much to talk about. She said, why don't you talk about your life and how you got to TNFP and bees and DNFP and Feedback National? I was like, that's a lot, and I don't feel comfortable talking about that. So I tried to come up with an idea that follows my story in some sort of concrete way and lands on what we're doing here at the National Food Project. So you might not have thought you're going to be learning about the coffee sector today, but you're going to learn a little bit about that and a little bit or more about the National Food Project. So again, my name is Motsinger. I started at TNFP, so you all know, about a year ago, a little over a year ago last October. And before that, I was at the One Tree where I met Jacqueline. So I came here from Vanderbilt. So I thought I'd kick it off with a little bit about me, like who I am outside of the professional world. So I grew up in that little blue county in North Carolina, that's Surrey County, North Carolina. It's in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains. If you've ever watched the Andy Griffith show, I grew up about 10 minutes from Mayberry on a farm. So I had a wild childhood running through the woods, and it was very I moved to Nashville in 2019 from Albuquerque, New Mexico, where I had been for about 5 years in graduate school. And my partner's first academic job was at the University of New Mexico. So we came to Nashville or Vanderbilt, and here we are. I essentially moved here. I dug up my front yard and put a garden in it. So that's me with some veggies I grew. As Brooke mentioned, I play the fall hammer banjo. That's a hobby that I picked up in COVID. Inspired by the work of folks like Brandon Giddens. That's actually my banjo. It's my first real banjo. So I had the starter banjo for a couple years and just got this one, and it's made my life. I'm also a beekeeper. This is me out at Sweeter Days Farm in Ashland City. I have some of my hives out there and some of my hives in my backyard in East Nashville. And I'm not going to talk about this today. It could be a whole other thing, but I'm also in the bee world, the co-founder of the Honey Collective, which is a honey cooperative, honey beekeeping cooperative here in Nashville that's creating a market for the hyper small scale beekeeper who has too much honey because one hive makes too much honey for one person. So how can we recoup some of our costs with sustainable beekeeping? So that's a little bit about me. So how I got here today and into the Nashville Food Project, it's been meandering. I am a meanderer in my life. Let's just be obvious about that. So I thought I'd start with a little bit of vulnerability, because that's how we get to know each other. So this day when I was 22, I was in Udaipur, India, because I thought I wanted to work in international development and the pursuit of what at the time I was calling women's empowerment, how much I have learned since then. And what I learned while I was in India was that here again, I'm trying to run around the world solving other people's problems, and wow, like all of that stuff is unfolding right in my own neighborhood, in my own backyard. At the same time, this was one of the most transformative experiences of my life, and some of the most meaningful relationships that I have in my life came out of this experience. So not all is lost. So I left India with this recognition that, oh, social and environmental justice and inequity is very pervasive in, State Road, North Carolina or Nashville, Tennessee. So I'm going to go home. While I was there, I also realized that I was really interested in agriculture and food. I grew up on a farm, grew up seeing more and more migrant workers come from my very small town. I was like, I want to understand how that works and the injustices within that system. So I went to the University of Sussex and I did a master's degree in the anthropology of development and social transformation, which is really what catalyzed my professional journey. So I've been a lot of places in my life. I am really good at changing jobs, maybe too good at it. Probably need to sit still a little bit more than I do. But my mom once told me that life is about figuring out what you don't want to do, and maybe I listened to that too closely. So after I left the University of Sussex, my first job was at Centro de los Derechos del Migrante, which is a transnational migrant rights organization with their policy office in Baltimore, Maryland, which is where I was, and their field-based office in Mexico City. So we were working on H2A, H2B guest worker rights. It was kind of my first taste of an organization building coalitions around transformation. So they were working on H2A, H2B guest worker rights. So those people that come to work in our communities in construction or agriculture or meat packing, what are called low skill, high risk industries, but are really high skilled, high risk industries. I left there, spent some time at the Center for Documentary Studies in Durham, North Carolina. Was working on video for social change. I was really interested in how we tell stories for social change. Was really interested in audio documentary, but then found myself teaching videography and video storytelling. At the same time, I was working in a farm-to-table kitchen as a farm apprentice. I had like 5 jobs at that point in my life. It was totally crazy making. And I was also their farmers market person. And I was really loving the farmers market situation. I still love farmers markets. When I get to work at farmers market, I'm like, this is great. So that was like a reconnection back to food and agriculture again, the farm to table movement, and seeing how all these people were working together to try and change food systems locally. I also worked thereafter. I moved to Albuquerque, as I mentioned, worked for an agricultural land trust, a startup accelerator where I started to learn how business works. That was really mind-blowing. And then that took me to the Wondery, where I was working in the social innovation practice, striving to help students understand how you do the work of social change and social innovation. Now Jacqueline is at the helm of that work, which is really exciting to see that going forward. So that's kind of where I was and where I have been with this food and agricultural stuff as the through line of my career. So my life really started to change when I fell into the coffee sector. It was kind of an accident, quite frankly. Until I was 29, I did not drink coffee. And I really started to drink coffee when my current spouse, early on when we were dating, was at my house one morning and went to the cupboard to look for coffee and was like, the hell is coffee? I said, I don't drink coffee. So we bought a pour over and some counterculture coffee, and I started to realize, oh, coffee can taste good if you drink good coffee. So I say coffee was my systems change and professional spark plug. It helped me start to ground myself in the things that I really care about. This is actually my spark plug, though. I like birds. This is a wood thrush. So that's my really spark plug. As was the question, how do private landowners play a role in landscape scale biodiversity conservation? So I was at the University of New Mexico. I was doing a Master's of Science in Geography, and I was trying to understand how different organizations and stakeholders work together to achieve conservation of the entire Rio Grande Valley in New Mexico. And I was doing this master's thesis, and I came across this book called Nature's Matrix, linking agriculture, biodiversity, conservation, and food sovereignty. And I was reading through this, and it was all about the role that really tiny, small-scale coffee farmers play in biodiversity conservation of like bird habitat. Here, birds are again, I don't work with birds, but and I was like, wow, like there are these really incredible examples all around the world of people whose stories we never hear doing really important work in the conservation of our environment. And at the same time, they're often very exploited in the global coffee sector. And so I was trying to understand how this was working. So I shifted gears. I was so inspired by this. It took me back to, my desire to work in international development, my love of food and beverage, my interest in conservation. Coffee was the intersection point of all of these things that I cared about. And I realized I can touch on all of these social and environmental justice topics in the global coffee sector. Who knew? So I changed my thesis and I started looking at corporate social responsibility in the global coffee sector and how NGOs, nonprofits, governments, businesses are all working together to try and move the coffee sector towards a more sustainable future. What y'all may not know, some of you may know this, is that this is an old figure, but $500 million at least annually is invested in coffee sustainability each year. So a lot of money. Coffee is said to be, in some figures, the second largest global sector in the world. So it's a tremendous industry. And there's a lot of really concerned organizations working to try and move the sector in a different future. But as I started to learn this, I also started to go visit all these different coffee roasteries, and I realized every coffee package has a statement about paying farmers well, or saving the environment, or something. And I was like, how is everybody doing this? Like, what is going on? So I really wanted to understand the role that business plays in the pursuit of sustainability. And what I learned is that although all these different actors are talking about it, the industry was still facing all of these challenges: racial injustice, gender inequity, incredibly low wages for the people that are making the thing with the most value in the sector, the actual coffee cherry. And I also learned that sustainability is a buzzword. It's virtuous discourse often, not always, but often. And so you have hundreds, thousands of different organizations having their own definition of sustainability. And when you're talking about a global sector, if everyone has their own definition of sustainability, we're not talking to each other. We're actually competing for the most persuasive sustainability action. How are we ever going to move forward as a collective? And so that's when I started to learn about systems transformation and really question, how do we do things differently? How do we build coalitions for change? So the coffee sector taught me that, in the industry, you have all of these different types of actors here on the left, from banks to restaurants to importers and baristas, all trying to do something. And everyone has their own solution. So for as many actors as there are, there's probably as many solutions. And often those solutions are not talking to each other. And so you get a lot of duplicity. You have five different roasters going to the same community to do the same project over and over. So our resources aren't going as far as they could. And we're also not understanding our most transformative path for action. And so I was like, well, how do we get this to be more connected, more synergistic? That was the first question that I had. I also started realizing that we're really good at band-aids. So we're really good at saying, coffee farmers who are not paid enough money are hungry. Let's feed them. Rather than saying, why is the industry paying coffee farmers 50 cents a pound per coffee, which is not covering their cost of production? And so if we understand an iceberg as, the tip of the iceberg is just scratching the surface, if we look at that in the context of solutions, we're wanting to get down to how do we change the values, the mental models, the way that we think about our brothers and sisters in the industry to really value equity and justice and sustainability as core values of our businesses. And so I wanted to know, how can the industry move towards these band-aid solutions to more systemic, value-shifting solutions, policy-based solutions that can really make a difference. Why do we need that? Well, because in coffee, just like the food system in Nashville, we got some really complex problems. So I'm not going to walk you through this, but this is from a project that was done while I was at Vanderbilt in the Wondery that was all about how climate change affects small-scale coffee producers' livelihoods. And this is only the start of the systems diagram. There's 5 other feedback loops in this diagram that show that this stuff is really complicated. So there's not a silver bullet solution. It's going to take many different actors working at many different positions in this landscape to try and address these experiential issues that we have. So I started reading obsessively about all different kinds of models for change making, and I came across this word that is maybe becoming a buzzword too, systems change. And I was like, wow, there is so much to learn and share and work on behalf of with colleagues and friends in the coffee sector and beyond. And so my life and my professional life really started to shift. So to switch gears, I want to just give a little primer about system change and what it is. Some of y'all, I'm sure, really already know this, but I like to think about system change as liberation. So there's a really wonderful short piece called Cycles of Liberation that is written by Bobby Harrow. And Bobby Harrow says that liberation is a commitment to the effort of critical transformation, to the people in our community, to the goal of equity and justice, and to love. It is about dismantling systems of oppression that continue to perpetuate injustice for people and communities. So when I think about systems change, that's what I want, is the fundamentally different future. Systems, we often say that our system is broken, but the system that we have today is doing what it's made to do. And so if we want to create change, we have to build a new system. We have to liberate ourselves from the practices, the relationships, the power dynamics that continue to keep some people down while uplifting others. And so when I think about systems change, this idea of liberation is, you know, the North Star for me and how I think about this work. Does anybody know who this is?
Yes. I love Joanna Macy.
Yeah, so this is Joanna Macy. So if you've never read Joanna Macy, I highly recommend it. She has been a light for me in deep times of despair. So Active Hope is one of her books that was truly transformational in my life. So Joanna Macy has, for me, a really useful way of framing systems transformation. A lot of her work is in the realm of like nuclear disarmament and just the erasure of nuclear energy, nuclear weapons, how devastating that is for our environments, for people. But she helps us understand systems transformation as the effort to move from business as usual, our current system, to what she calls the great turning. So Joanna Macy says that business as usual is things like the industrial growth society, focused on short-term profit maximization. We don't really care about the long-term negative effects as long as we get what we're getting, and we're getting it good in the short term. What that then leads to is the great unraveling. So environmental collapse, people being starved, not having enough food to put on their table. Incredible inequities and injustices in our world, both for humans and more than humans. The great unraveling often for many of us also leads to extreme despair. The problems are so big, I don't know what to do, so I'm going to turn the other way and I'm just going to go back to business as usual. Joanna Macy says, wait a second, you can use that despair to be empowering and help you get to the great turning, which is systems change, which unravels and dismantles exploitative economic structures. So the goal of systems change is to move on this continuum. And the key is to do a lot of work to push through this, because this middle phase right here is where we often get lost. We get so low, we don't know where to go. So we go right back to doing what we were doing, and we miss the opportunity to build relationships for transformation. So in Coffee at the National Food Project, we're asking, how do we get to here? We get to here through a lot of relationships. We get to here by imagining different futures and the steps that will help us get there. And by really thinking about the role that each of us play in these solution landscapes and in making a difference. So it's about that. And it's about these three types of actions. So I'll come back to this, I think, maybe in a little bit, but in the context of that iceberg model, this is a kind of different way of thinking about the iceberg model. So Joanna Macy says that systems change takes three core types of actions, all working at the same time. So holding actions in defense of life, those are the things that keep things from getting worse. So for example, emergency food relief. A person is hungry, we don't want them to get more hungry, we're going to give them food. We need to keep doing that while we build a different future. Transforming foundations of common life. So this is where we're starting to create different ways of doing things. We might have a sliding scale pop-up produce market in a community that has food insecurity, because that helps them purchase food that is more at their price point. That's a different way of doing things. The pursuit of green energy and solar power. That is transforming our reliance on fossil fuels. So these actions that really change our relationship with business as usual and move us closer to that social and environmental justice, the love and care of our environments and our communities. And then the most difficult, the thing that takes lifetimes upon lifetimes, so don't lose faith, that's just how it goes, is shifts in perceptions and values. This is the most important, but all of this is important. How do we change our ways of thinking and relating with one another, our values about what matters, so that we no longer can accept morally and ethically the oppression of different groups or the degradation of environments. All of that together leads us to the great turning or to systems change. I know this is a lot, but I have. So I was doing this work. So while I was at the Wondery at Vanderbilt. Wondery is great in that they say to staff, you have a wild idea, why don't you go for it? So I had the wild idea for the Coffee Equity Lab. So I got to do some systems change, social innovation, teaching students about social change through the complexity of the global coffee sector. That's us in the Wondery with the Coffee Equity Lab, with Ted Fisher, who's faculty there, who was co-conspirator in this effort. And while I was doing this work, you know, I started to ask that question again. I'm still trying to solve problems that, yes, they're related to my community, but I don't know what's going on a farm. Like, yes, I can still be connected to that and make a difference, but I just moved here in 2019, COVID happened, I don't know anybody, I really care about food and agriculture. How can I get more invested in my community and do this work with people that I know are doing this work in our city? So I decided to leave Vanderbilt, took a couple months off, and miraculously, the food project fell into my lap. The food project. So now I'm going to shift gears and talk about food projects. So coffee taught me what I know about systems change, rooted me in food and agriculture again, made me realize how much I care about this, and brought me to the National Food Project. So the National Food Project, welcome again. Our mission is to bring people together to grow, cook, and share food with the goals of cultivating community and alleviating hunger in our city. Why food? Well, food is connected to everything. It's connected to labor rights, agriculture and environmental health, education, economic well-being, climate. Agriculture is one of the greatest contributors to climate change. Health issues are directly connected to food. So the Food Project believes if we can work within food, we can have transformational impact in all these other realms of life, and work with all these different organizations, communities, individuals to have massive impact, not just within food, but within the general well-being of our communities. I was really excited when I started to learn this because I was like, here's an organization that's thinking about food as a systems level opportunity. It is related to all things. It takes many different solutions and organizations working together. So the National Food Project is motivated by a couple of, well, many different challenges or opportunities, to use more positive language. So about 12% of Nashvillians are food insecure, so they can't readily access the food that they want and need in their communities. That might be because there's not a market in their community. It might be because they don't earn a wage that allows them to access the food. People of color in Nashville and in our country, generally speaking, are 2 times more likely to face food insecurity. In addition, 40% of all food is wasted. Perfectly good food is thrown in the dump. These figures might actually be a little bit out of date. I was just talking to Mary Kay, our comms person. She's like, sorry, the figures I think are a little out of date, but rough estimates, forgive us. And then Tennessee is losing hundreds of thousands of farmland every year. That is even more pronounced for farmers of color. I think maybe 2% of white farmers lose farmland every year, and the figure for BIPOC farmers is something like upwards of 60 to 80%. So that discrepancy is huge. So the National Food Project is trying to figure out how do we work in community with other organizations to transform food insecurity. We want everyone to have the food they want and need. How do we keep all this food from being wasted that's perfectly good to eat? And how do we use agriculture to teach people how to grow their own food, build self-reliance, and also relocalize our food economy so that the distance traveled is not so far. We do this through 3 departments: grow, cook, and share. Our grow department is where our community gardens and urban agriculture live. So we have 3 sites. We have the Magruder Community Garden, which is about 7 minutes from here in North Nashville at the Magruder Family Resource Center. We have the community farm at Mill Ridge, which is at Metro's newest park down in Antioch. And we have the Haywood Lane Farm, which is the site of Growing Together. Growing Together is a market farm, so we're growing food for the market. And the farmers are a community of immigrants from Burma, Myanmar, and Bhutan, who came from agrarian backgrounds, and this creates a pathway for them to earn sometimes primary income, so their biggest source of income, sometimes it's secondary. The community gardens, we grow food in community with people in our neighborhood. So at Magruder, they're communal beds, so our staff are teaching people what's going on in those beds and engaging people in growing collectively. At the community farm at Millridge, we have two models. You can either lease your own plot for like $5 a year, it's very cheap, to grow whatever you want vegetable wise. I think we have about 60 gardeners out there this year. We just added 8 more plots, so we always have a wait list. And then we have Full Circle, which is production garden, so sort of like growing together, but volunteers come and help us grow the food. So you learn how to plant, weed, do winter preparation, frost cover, all that stuff is happening at Millridge. At Millridge, we have the ability to use up to 7 acres, so we're really excited. There's so much that we can do down there. The last thing I'll say is these connect people to access to resources and education and land. We also, the food that's grown in the community gardens is shared out with our community for free. That's something great that comes out of those gardens. Our meals team, our cook department, is how TNFP got started by Tolu Quinn. It was a spinoff of Mobile Loaves and Fishes. This figure is actually low. Last year, we prepared and shared over 300,000 meals with our community. We worked with a network of, I think, 35 organizational partners at 50 different sites around the city. So we cook the meals in family style, then we take them to community partners and they share them with the communities that they serve. The thing that is innovative, if you will, about our community meals program is that the majority of our meals are made with donated and recovered food. So this past year in 2023, we recovered almost 300,000 pounds of food from grocery stores, restaurant partners, gleaning from local farms, stuff that we didn't have to pay for. And sometimes folks have food drives for us for like staples like oil, rice, beans, pasta. And then we purchase a little bit of food. Really those staples are what we're purchasing. We have some relationships with local farms because we like to support our local agricultural economy. And then the food project grows a little bit of food that comes into our kitchen, but most of the food we grow is going out through market pathways or to folks who want that produce in Antioch or North Nashville. So diverting the food waste is a core value of our community meals program because it's perfectly good food that people can still eat. The last part of our work is our food access or share team. So this is the logistical arm of TNFP. This is how we get our food out into the world. So our community meals program is based on a sliding scale model based on the budget ability of an organizational partner to pay. So it makes it accessible to folks. Our produce sharing program, we're still building the model. Currently, we're mostly giving that produce away, but are also looking into like produce RX. So could we prescribe produce with healthcare providers for folks with hypertension, diabetes, and recoup some of those costs through federal grants, health equity grants, things of that nature. So share team, they're driving around the city all day, delivering food, creating routes, now managing volunteers who are helping us driving food around, and really just making sure stuff that we have to share is getting out into our community. That's the high level of what we're doing. Upcoming opportunities, there are always opportunities to get involved. I want to be doing my job. I didn't say this. So if y'all want to come volunteer with us, we'd love to have y'all, even your organizations, if you want to come volunteer, please do. Our gardens are my favorite place to volunteer because I really like gardening, but chopping vegetables in the kitchen, sorting produce is also really fun. Hosting pantry items, being an organizational partner. If you and your job are like, I want to collaborate with Food Project on something, let's talk. There's lots of opportunities to explore that together. So the last kind of couple minutes, I'm just going to talk about our newest realm of work that we're stepping into, which is Feedback Nashville. I think some of y'all were at our launch day event in December. So last year, TNFP set a strategic organizational priority to lean into relational systems change as a value of the organization. How can we know as an organization what our role is to play in the food system explicitly, and then bring organizations together to make sure our efforts are synergized. So Feedback Nashville, it is not of TNFP. TNFP is generally providing support. We're just administrative person organization at this time. But this is a citywide initiative to build a better, more just and sustainable food system for Nashville. It was conceptualized by about nine founding organizations about 2 years ago, who said, we don't necessarily know that we need more community gardens or more mobile markets. Like, there's so much knowledge and effort already going in our city, before we decide of more solutions that we need, what if we try to understand what's going on? We don't fully understand our local food system, its opportunities and limitations. So let's take a step back, go talk to everyone in our community, every corner of our city, to understand what are your food challenges, what's not working, how do we do things differently so that everybody can have the food that they want and need in our city. Again, just briefly, it is exactly the same as the coffee sector. We have a lot of different organizations, public and private, working to solve food-based challenges in our city. But because of the funding landscape in the nonprofit sector or the hustle and bustle of life, we're often siloed. Sometimes we work together, but generally we're kind of working in our little islands. We're also really good at working on the holding actions, those band-aids, those things that get people food to hungry people when they need it, but don't address the underlying causes of hunger. Why do we get stuck there? Because it's easy to fund. Trying to convince somebody to support you for shifting values and mental models is really hard work. But we believe that it's possible to do all of this work together. And so Feedback Nashville, the founding members, said, we really want to start to understand how do we get into that, unpack those root causes and events so that we can truly start to make a difference. In the ideal world, TNFP might have to exist. So that's the goal of Feedback Nashville too. So Feedback Nashville is really about moving us from these ad hoc, fragmented, sometimes competitive approaches to food-based challenges towards systems approaches where we're understanding unique roles, resources, and relationships we all have to bring to the transformation effort. This little dot here is that often systems transformation work takes an organization or a couple of organizations working around the ecosystem to bring people together, sort of acting like a mother hen, if you will, because we leave meetings and we forget to communicate. So currently, TNFP is this first year of Feedback Nashville playing that role with support from Forum for the Future, which is an international systems transformation facilitator convener. But we imagine that this work will go to other organizations and leaders in the future. Just to reiterate this, because I think it's really important, Feedback Nashville is really trying to get us business as usual through the despair and the apathy and into the connected ways of working together to the great journey. So how are we doing this, you might be wondering? So Feedback Nashville has a steering committee of 16 members. Some of them work in food, some of them are like organizers and are deeply connected to our communities. That steering committee has developed an expansive community engagement strategy to hear from every corner of our city about what's working and what's not in our city. Forum for the Future is helping them develop the processes, the questions, the exercises that help us get the information that we need. Forum for the Future is also helping us digest and synthesize that information into understandings of what actions are the most transformational that we can take. What are our biggest gaps in actions? Where are we doing really well? Where are we going to work together in the future? So this is 3 of the steering committee members and myself this past Monday making a banner for the MLK Day March on Monday. It seemed like that might get snowed or freezing out, but you know, we might be there in 1 degree weather. So the steering committee is really the organizing unit of Feedback Nashville. The first year is all about what we call, I think I maybe missed a slide. Well, no, I guess I did. So the first year is about understanding the system. What's working, what's not. In system change, we call this diagnosis, so diagnosing the system. Then we're gonna engage our community in envisioning the future. What do we want the food future for Nashville to look like based on what's working and what's not? And then the third step out of that diagnosis and the future visioning is to say, what are our most transformational opportunities for action in the short term and the long term? And how are we going to resource and build the enabling environment about that? So how are we going to get funders to donate us? How are we going to work with Metro? How are we going to build better opportunities for collaboration and coordination? If any of you want to get involved, again, there's lots of opportunities. If you want to help us with our outreach and host a community event, we're inviting organizational partners to join us by meeting with their not constituents, but the people that they serve, to hear their voices. We have a facilitator's guidebook that helps you, gives you a lot of exercises to do with your community. Attend an upcoming event. If it's not snowing on Monday, come see us at the convocation at MLK Day at the end of February, February 22nd. Some of you maybe, we're having a food system stakeholder convening. We're bringing together food system stakeholders to do a diagnosis workshop that will be facilitated by Forum for the Future. Then on the following Saturday, February 24th, is our first kickoff event. Really come eat biscuits and coffee with us and talk to us about, tell us your stories about food and what you cook for our city. And then in March, we're going to have rollout community events across the city with our steering committee members and organizational partners. And of course, spread the word. If you do Instagram or Facebook, it's at Feedback Nashville. Share our stories, tell people about us. We much appreciate it. And the last thing I'll say in all of this, one of the things that I've learned is that you'll sometimes hear, you may have heard, Feedback Nashville is a 2-year initiative. And I'm here to tell you that this is a lifetime or more initiative, that this requires us to all keep coming back to the table, joining rooms like this, knowing what each other's doing. So Joanna Macy helps us think on geological timescales, because we're tiny blips in this universe. And so to think that we can figure this all out in 2 years is totally false. So I invite y'all to all join us for the long term, and to keep doing the work that y'all are doing in the long term. We never know its impact in the geological